Hi there, I'm Stephen Lepitak, Executive Editor of The Drum, and welcome to one of our chain interviews where I speak to one of the leading marketers who we've invited to head up one of our awards juries for the year. And I am so lucky to be joined by Asha Gourinath. Have I got that right?
Yes, I think so.
Thank you.
Almost.
Who's the lead who leads digital marketing and CRM and growth markets for Southeast Asia at Grab. Asha, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, thank you for being our chair for the Drum Digital Awards for APAC this year. It's amazing that you said yes. We are so grateful that you're going to do that. I'll talk to you later on a bit about what you're hoping to see from the awards, but would you mind if we start by just kind of talking about what your experiences have been in the last few months at Grab, the work that you and your team have had to, well, I guess, put in place out of nowhere since probably February or March?
I think that's a great question, right? As you know, the times have been quite challenging in terms of how the business has had to evolve given the changing consumption patterns and demand patterns, right? There are also always these debates given that the pandemic and the sight on certain business verticals, how exactly do we go about in terms of saving and efficiency, be it marketing spends or otherwise. There are debates, should we go dark, should we continue spending? I guess it's important to be present for your customers, and it's also a good time to be spending on advertising, because I feel like you reach a lot of quality audiences if there are people who are going dark, and you get a lot of premium ad placements and slots, right? It's a good time to figure out how we get the most from our spends. In a way, I would say it's a good time to increase your excess share of voice, right? By maintaining or increasing advertising budgets as your competitors go dark. I also feel like it's a great time for brands everywhere to kind of evaluate, right? How exactly do we want to reframe our messaging while we still stay relevant to our customers? Maybe there needs to be a more touch of empathy and otherwise, with given there are so many negative news and that's the only thing you see surging on media all the time. Maybe as brands and marketers, maybe it's our job to then figure how do we kind of have that some sense of empathy or positivity still in their lives and be relevant to them.
Yeah, that's a word that certainly when I started having conversations with marketers in March and April, empathy was a word that I was hearing here and there, but I do wonder just how much at the forefront of marketing strategies that has been, especially for Grab. What has that meant for you guys in terms of showing empathy?
I think small things, right? Like, say, for example, like our USP has always been ride hailing or, say, food delivery or multiple verticals that we function on. It's about how we've also adapted and evolved with time, right? Before the pandemic came in place, I don't think we ever had contactless deliveries or, say, having hygiene as the first USP when you're taking a ride, right? Providing your passengers with hand sanitizers or ensuring that your drivers who are driving for you feel safe. So I think there are things on how we've evolved. I think also brilliant example which I would like to cite was as and when the pandemic hit, there was a the huge rush which you used to have for dining restaurants or otherwise where you used to go to your smaller merchants, right, or your hawker streets. All of that stopped suddenly. Suddenly, all of us were forced to work from home. Kids were stuck from school at home. And I think Grab actually did a great thing there where we kind of tried to marry the two business problems, which was for our consumers as well as our merchants who were there on the restaurant chain for food delivery, and how can we marry the two? And that's where we kind of partnered with Google on this AI solution where we got all the kids, you know, from parents who were there in Grab and their kids to start doodling all these food items. We had close to 10,000 plus drawings, which were then uploaded to kind of train the AI to come up with a system to recognize the things on our menu. And then we kind of made a campaign out of it, given the limitations that we couldn't shoot or anything. We kind of selected kids from within the employees and came out with our first advertising campaign, which was all done in house. And it was a great way of seeing on how we could marry via media consumption habits and a real-time problem and business objective together and come up with a brilliant campaign. I think it was one of our most cost efficient and at the same time a fun campaign to work on. Like we got a lot of word of mouth and PR out of it. So it was like simply telling like, okay, kids could draw anything. You draw this and we get it for you. Mm-hmm. So they would draw it, upload it, and it gets home delivered at your place. And same time, it helped us shape up demand even for the merchant side, right? Who were struggling and were finding it hard to survive. So I think it's about kind of trying to marry data insights and at the same time figure out if this was your brand messaging, how do you reframe it to be relevant at these times?
Where, I hope this isn't too obvious, but where did the insights come from that actually drove that campaign or the idea for that campaign?
So the insights for this particular campaign was actually, this was a partnership which we had with Grab and Google. So it was a Google AI product which they came up with. And this was the business problem that we shared with them, right? Saying these are the patterns that we see. This is how we do. Plus we needed a tech partner with whom we could collaborate to do the same. And that's how we partnered together and came up with the entire hypothesis on how we could roll it out. And we call it the Google Delivery Doodles campaign, which was powered by Grab. And this was something we ran across the region, and it was quite unique and probably, I think, one of the most fun campaigns I worked on this year, at least.
Yeah, that's great idea. One of the things that certainly I wonder as we progress forward, we've seen such a sharp rise in the use of online and e-commerce, and actually it's been a lifeline for many people to learn how they can actually go about using online to receive deliveries when they're stuck at home. And I mean, you guys have obviously you've realised that demand. How then do you lean into that longer term? What lessons have you learned longer term that Grab can take from the last few months and keep going with?
I think lessons for us is also like, I think for us personally also, we were looking at Mart as a vertical, right, for groceries and item delivery, which was a beta which was happening in certain markets even before the pandemic. But when the pandemic hit, it became even more relevant. And that's when we had to kind of speed up operations and try to see on how we could help or cater to our particular user base, right? Given there are so many options. So I believe like, as business leads within Grab also say, right, this is a time when we need to be really paranoid, very alert, and we need to adapt and move as fast as we can if we want to do the right things and be there to do good for people. So I guess that's the perspective that we would look at when we are looking at e-commerce or other consumption patterns on how we want to go about it. If you also look at it historically, I'm sure like all of us have been talking mobile marketing, or mobile is going to be the first big thing in internet. Every year, that's what we talk about. Probably this pandemic has actually become the year where probably mobile and internet has finally arrived, right? Because if you look at it historically, for many generations, people, when they experience internet for the first time, it's probably on a desktop. This is probably on the first time because all of us are stuck at home. We're spending a lot more time on your mobile screen. Many times you would do research on mobile, but it was never the last mile where conversions would happen. For app-first businesses like us, now that you're spending so much screen time on your mobile screens and people are kind of stuck at home, I guess it's a great alternative for all businesses. If you look at how a Netflix or an Amazon and the others are thriving, I think in the true sense, you're kind of reaching out to a lot more users this year than you ever have. And probably all the predictions and surveys which are happening, hey, this growth is going to take you 5 years, everyone will probably have to redo reports because no one expected this year to turn out the way it did.
And so, I mean, in some ways, then a lot of companies will have been prepared to some extent in terms of they'll have mobile options. But then, I mean, for Grab, for instance, how then have you accelerated and developed what was already on offer?
I think what was already on offer, it was a lot of effort, I think, primarily by our operations team and BD teams in terms of figuring out how they could have more options or merchants online from a mart standpoint or a grocery standpoint, even if from a food perspective, right? We wanted to see how could we be more relevant in terms of expanding the choices which were already available. Because earlier, maybe small things like even in Singapore, if you see, there were certain restaurants which were limited to certain areas. Now there are options which is island-wide delivery. So you have to kind of innovate and adapt. So say, for example, if the restaurant was in one corner, maybe the meter was always restricted to a 3 kilometer radius, right? And the delivery would only happen within there. Right now, even if you were 15 kilometers away, the delivery can still happen from your favorite restaurant, because earlier you could just drive over or just go. But now, given the restrictions, maybe you can't. So you have to kind of readapt the way you're working and the way you're thinking to reach that last mile. So I guess these are more or less the kind of changes that all of us have adapted to in terms of way of working to still be relevant during these times.
Yeah, and if you're a digital marketer, then I guess everyone should technically, every marketer should be digital to some extent. But what would be how what would be your insight as to how you think the role is evolving, especially when it comes to the use of data and so forth, and how has that changed over the last 6 months?
I think I think there's a lot of emphasis on data, right? Because there will always be this pressure where they want to understand, what's the ROI we are yielding, given, there is a huge maybe surge in demands at some verticals, maybe in some verticals it isn't, right? Depending on the market and the dynamics and the regulations. So I guess data does give you a directional sense, not just from a business perspective, but even from the media ad slots you're buying, or in terms of the consumption patterns of the customers, or what is their interest that they're looking into, right? So I guess we do have to look at the life cycle journey of the users and same time marry that with the data points on how we want to tweak or come up with a particular campaign or a business idea to still be to ensure that we are headed in the right direction. So I guess when it comes to digital marketing, it's very important to then kind of experiment and test out things to figure out what's working or what doesn't work. Because what probably worked earlier may not necessarily work in the current scenario. So I guess it's about marrying data and having clear use cases, right, which is tied on to your business objectives to ultimately see how we are reaching the right mile to then kind of prove your ROI and worth.
And how then can you still use the data that, if we're going to, and I hate this term, but I'll use it this once, if we are now moving towards a new normal, what does that mean for the data that we had beforehand? How do you use what was basically the old reality and what we knew about consumers then? Now, how is it still relevant?
I think it really depends on the business and the data points you want to use, right? Especially in digital marketing, data points are evolving on an ongoing basis. So I don't think it's just about historical data, like what a customer would like, maybe my interest, like maybe I was listening to a particular band which was heavy metal last month, I was totally into it, but probably this month I'm only listening to hip hop. So that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not interested in metal anymore. It really depends on how we slice and dice the data, and ultimately what is the key takeaway or input or action that you want from me. I may be listening to hip hop, but that doesn't really mean that I'm not interested in food. So it's a multiple variety of options, right? Be it cuisine related or entertainment related. Because many times I feel we as marketers have these assumptions. Hey, if he or she likes this particular cuisine, maybe they're not going to try this, or maybe let's try showing them the same thing. I guess at times you could have data points, but end of the day, it also depends on your creative strategy. Maybe you could show them multiple options and let the customer decide rather than us assuming by data patterns this is what he or she likes. Because end of the day, I still think, there's still a human intervention and sense. A person knows what he or she wants more than what the numbers are telling you. So it's a combination of things. I think data helps us in terms of coming up with a great manifesto, curating certain testing strategies. But ultimately, I think it's about how great or brilliant your campaign messaging was, how relevant your brand is, and ultimately, if people are loyal to you, if your customers keep coming back to you, I think that's a true story which kind of marries all together and is a great thing which stays long term.
And I said earlier on that you're going to be our jury chair for Digital Awards in APAC. So I'd love to know what you're looking for when you're going to be casting your eye over the entrants this year, and if there's anything that currently is particularly exciting you that you want to see more of from the entries.
I think first of all, I think it's an honor to even be part of this jury, and quite excited because I think this year is quite challenging and dynamic versus any other year, and it'll be really interesting to see, what kind of submissions or entries we receive from advertisers and brand marketeers within the region, how they've innovated and what have they done differently to still be relevant during those times, and what are those amazing results. And I think it's a great forum to kind of learn and share and replicate those ideas with a broader audience. I think like many people might say like, okay, this has been so challenging. A lot of people might say we don't want to, be associated with any awards or there's nothing to show. But the ones who do, I think they should be appreciated, right? To see what were those out of box ideas, what have they done so differently? And if yes, why not share it with the rest of the world?
Well, Asha, I will see you at the virtual judging that's coming up in a while. It's been lovely talking to you, and thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.